The sun dipped low over the historic courtyard of Buckingham Palace, painting the ancient stone walls with a warm, golden glow. The air was thick with the buzz of tourists, their voices a constant hum as they snapped photos of the royal guards in their iconic red tunics and towering bearskin hats. The guards stood like statues, their discipline a stark contrast to the lively chaos around them. Among the crowd, a group of 5 rowdy tourists stumbled into view, their laughter cutting through the murmurs like a jagged blade. They were clearly drunk, their steps uneven, their faces flushed from too much alcohol. The smell of cheap beer wafted from the cans they clutched, and their boisterous energy drew wary glances from the other visitors. At the center of the group was a burly man with a sunburned face, his crooked grin revealing a dangerous mix of arrogance and recklessness. His bloodshot eyes scanned the courtyard, searching for something or someone to target, and they landed on the nearest guard, a tall, broad-shouldered figure standing motionless at his post, his gaze fixed straight ahead, unyielding as the stone beneath his feet. The guard's face was a mask of discipline, his features sharp and unreadable beneath the shadow of his bearskin hat. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture so rigid that he seemed almost otherworldly, a relic of tradition amidst the modern chaos. The burly man nudged his friends, a sly grin spreading across his face as he pointed at the guard. The group huddled together, their laughter growing louder, more malicious as they exchanged slurred taunts and dares. The lanky guy in a backwards cap pulled out his phone, the camera already rolling, while a woman with smeared makeup egged the burly man on, her voice shrill with excitement. The crowd around them began to shift, sensing the trouble brewing, their whispers tinged with unease. Some parents pulled their children closer, while others craned their necks to watch, their curiosity outweighing their apprehension. But the guard remained still, his eyes fixed on some distant point, as if the chaos unfolding before him didn't exist. The tourists grew bolder with each passing second, feeding off the guard's lack of reaction. The burly man took a long swig from his beer can, the liquid spilling down his chin as he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He shouted something unintelligible, his words slurring into a mocking tone that echoed across the courtyard. The other tourists in the group howled with laughter, their voices a chaotic chorus of jeers as they began to circle the guard like a pack of hyenas. One of them tossed an empty beer can toward the guard's feet, the aluminum clattering loudly against the pavement before rolling to a stop just inches from his polished boots. The crowd held its breath, waiting for a reaction, but the guard didn't flinch. His stillness only seemed to fuel the group's recklessness. The burly man stepped closer, his face twisted into a sneer, and leaned in until his breath, reeking of alcohol, was inches from the guard's face. He mocked the guard's uniform, his hat, his stoic demeanor, anything to provoke a response. The woman in the group cackled, her voice piercing, while the lanky guy zoomed in with his phone, narrating the scene with a mocking commentary. The tension in the courtyard was palpable now, a storm ready to break. The other tourists watched with bated breath, some whispering nervously, others filming the scene with their phones, knowing they were witnessing something that could go viral. Then, in a moment of reckless bravado, the burly man reached into his jacket and pulled out a half-empty bottle of beer. He shook it violently, foam bubbling at the top, and with a wild, triumphant grin, he hurled it directly at the guard. The bottle spun through the air, end over end, catching the fading sunlight in a glint of green glass. The crowd gasped as it shattered against the guard's chest, the impact sending a spray of beer and glass shards cascading down his pristine uniform. The scarlet fabric darkened with the stain, and the sharp scent of alcohol mingled with the metallic tang of the moment's violence. Shards of glass glittered on the pavement like tiny stars, a stark contrast to the chaos they represented. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. The crowd fell silent, the tourists' laughter dying in their throats as the gravity of their actions sank in. The burly man took a step back, his confidence faltering, his eyes darting nervously to his friends. The woman clutched the lanky guy's arm, her earlier bravado replaced by fear, while the others in the group exchanged panicked glances. They had crossed a line, and they knew it. The guard, who had been a statue until that moment, slowly turned his head. His eyes, sharp and piercing, locked onto the burly man with an intensity that sent a shiver down the spine of everyone watching. The air crackled with anticipation, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Then the guard took a single, deliberate step forward, his boots echoing against the stone courtyard with a sound that seemed to reverberate through the entire palace grounds, a warning of what was to come. The tourists froze, their earlier bravado evaporating as the guard's towering presence loomed over them. He didn't shout, didn't raise his rifle, but there was something in his movements, a controlled, almost predatory calm. That made the group instinctively back away. The burly man stammered something, his voice trembling, but the guard's gaze silenced him. Then, in a move that no one expected, the guard reached up and removed his bearskin hat, revealing a jagged scar that ran across his temple, a mark that told a story of battles far beyond the ceremonial duties of a royal guard. The crowd gasped, and whispers spread like wildfire through the onlookers. Some recognized the scar as a sign of combat experience. Others speculated about his past. Perhaps he had served in a war zone or survived a dangerous mission. This wasn't just any guard. This was a man who had seen things, fought things, survived things that no one in that courtyard could imagine. The guard set his hat down on the ground with a deliberate slowness, never breaking eye contact with the burly man. Then, in a voice so low it was almost a growl, he spoke for the first time, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. "You shouldn't have done that." The tourist stumbled backward, their faces pale as the guard took another step forward. The sound of boots echoed from the distance. Reinforcements. 2 more guards appeared from the shadows of the palace, their rifles at the ready, their faces stern and unyielding. But the scarred guard raised a hand, stopping them in their tracks. This was personal. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the scarred guard advanced on the group, his every movement radiating a quiet fury that was more terrifying than any shout. The burly man, now visibly shaking, turned to run, but the guard was faster. In a blur of motion, he grabbed the man by the collar and yanked him back, pinning him against the palace railing with a strength that belied his earlier stillness. The man's knees buckled, his bravado replaced by sheer terror as he begged for mercy, his voice cracking with fear. The other tourists screamed, dropping their phones and cans as they scattered, but the 2 approaching guards quickly blocked their escape, herding them back into the courtyard with military precision. The scarred guard leaned in close to the burly man, his voice a deadly whisper as he warned him of the consequences of disrespecting a royal guard. The man's pleas grew more desperate, his hands clawing at the air, but the guard's grip was iron. The crowd watched, some in awe, others in fear, as the scene unfolded. Then the guard released the man, letting him collapse to the ground in a trembling heap, and turned to the shattered bottle at his feet. He picked up a single shard of glass, holding it up to the fading sunlight, and the crowd watched in awe as he closed his fist around it, letting a trickle of blood drip onto the pavement, a silent testament to his unshakable resolve. The act was both a warning and a statement. He was not to be trifled with. The tourists were escorted away by the other guards, their hands cuffed, their heads bowed in shame as the crowd parted to let them pass. Some onlookers clapped, others whispered in hushed tones, their phones already buzzing with videos of the incident. But the scarred guard wasn't finished. As the courtyard began to clear, he returned to his post, replacing his hat with a slow, deliberate motion. He wiped the blood from his hand, the crimson stain a stark contrast against his pale skin, and resumed his position, standing as still as ever, as if nothing had happened. Yet, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the palace, a faint shadow moved in the distance, a lone figure watching from the edge of the courtyard. The figure was dressed in dark clothing, their face obscured, but their presence sent a ripple of unease through the few remaining tourists. Was this someone connected to the scarred guard's past? A friend? An enemy? The guard's eyes flickered toward the figure for the briefest moment, a flicker of recognition crossing his face, before he returned to his stoic vigil. As night fell over Buckingham Palace, the courtyard emptied, but the story of the scarred guard spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with footage of the confrontation, the hashtag number sign Scarred Guard trending within hours. Who was he? What battles had he fought to earn that scar? And who was the mysterious figure watching from the shadows? The questions lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the incident, a haunting reminder that some stories were far deeper and far more dangerous than they appeared. One thing was certain: that group of drunken tourists had picked the wrong man to mess with, and the world would never forget the day they crossed paths with a royal guard who was far more than he seemed.